I am Stephanie Thompson, and this is my persuasive speech. My speech is Allowing a Death with Dignity. We're going to talk about death with dignity laws, um, what they do for people, how they've been implemented in other states, some opposing arguments to death with dignity, as well as why I believe it's important to have um, legislation for death with dignity, and not just in Nevada, but with all 50 states. Um, so to begin, what do we mean by death with dignity laws? Well, um, by that I mean a state law allowing physicians to prescribe medications to terminally ill patients, which they can then take and end their lives at the time of their choosing. It is not the same as euthanasia. Euthanasia would be caused by a third party, um, causing someone else to die. This is the patient making the choice and doing the act themselves. It comes from a right to die philosophy, which, according to Wikipedia, is right to die is a concept based on the opinion that human beings are entitled to end their life or decline life prolonging treatments. Um, this allows terminally ill patients to have the right to choose to end their lives on their own terms when they feel their quality of life is not worth living anymore. Um, Other states have passed death with dignity laws. Currently, Oregon, Washington, Vermont, New Jersey, Maine, Colorado, California, the District of Columbia, New Mexico, and Hawaii all have death with dignity statutes. Um, Oregon was the first state to pass a Death with Dignity Act in 1997. There are legal parameters in place to prevent abuse of the law, and there are multiple steps that people have to do to qualify for the Death with Dignity Act. First, you have to submit a oral oral request to your primary physician. Then there's a 15-day waiting period, and you have to submit a second oral request along with a written request to your physician, who has to make sure you meet the requirement, which are you have to be 6 months um, terminally ill with a prognosis of 6 months or less, um, as well as mentally competent in order to make that decision. And then a second physician has to confirm your diagnosis of terminally ill, your prognosis of less than 6 months, and your mental competence. Only after all that is done can someone get a prescription for the medication that would end their life. Um, However, once they get that prescription, it's up to them to choose to use it, and some people do not. There were many studies done after the law was passed in 1998, and um, not everyone who got the prescription used it. Um, but some people liked the idea of being able to choose, and they wanted that prescription so that when they felt the time was right, they could use it. Whether they used it or not was totally up to them. Um, some of the opposing arguments against allowing a death with dignity law, um, when Oregon first passed this law, many people were worried that um, it would lead to people being pressured into ending their lives even if they weren't terminally ill. Um, it could also lead to physicians eliminating patients that no longer were productive in society, or it could decrease the palliative care that was used for people in order to prolong their lives. But according to Oregon's Department of Human Services in the New England Journal of Medicine, physicians assisted suicide was the cause of 37 deaths in 2014, which was only 1/8 of 1% of all of the deaths that year in Oregon. And that was written by S. Oki, MD. There was also concern terminally ill patients would be pressured to end their lives due to financial reasons, which another study by the New England Journal of Medicine um, about physician-assisted suicides in Oregon in the year of 1998 um, found that no evidence to support that fear of financial burden causing this act to be used. Um, There's ethical concerns um, when it comes to physician-assisted suicide. I read an article, An Ethical Analysis of Euthanasia and Physician-Assisted Suicide, Rejecting Euthanasia and Accepting Physician-Assisted Suicide with Palliative Care. And in that article, they went over 4 main ethical points. The first was autonomy, which is a right to self-determination. And a lot of patients who choose death with dignity want their autonomy. That's why they choose it. They don't want that loss of self. They want to be able to make that choice, to make that decision for themselves. When you have a terminal illness like ALS and you lose all function except for your mind, you can't use your body. You can't tell someone you're in pain any longer. And you have to watch your family watch you die. They don't want that for themselves. They want self-determination for what's going to happen to them. A second ethical point is non-maleficence, which is preventing harm. Physicians are supposed to do no harm, which people in favor of dying with dignity, a lot of people think that allowing someone to wither away and suffer for a year in pain every day, that is harm. Allowing someone to make a choice and stop that suffering for themselves, now that is preventing harm. Beneficence is another ethical issue, which is doing the most good. As a society, we should all try to do the most good that we can do for others. And if you're looking at this issue, there are times when allowing someone to use a Death with Dignity Act would be doing the most good. There's also a question of justice, which is just fair treatment. And people in favor of this act think fair treatment can encompass allowing one person to be taken off of life support and die in peace. And to be fair, shouldn't we allow someone else with stomach cancer and pain every day to also die in peace without that pain? And those are the main 4 ethical points that most of these opponents to this act can bring up. I also believe that if protocols of the current death with dignity laws are followed, terminally ill patients are allowed the freedom to make their own choice and decision about what happens to them with their care, which in healthcare, the right to choose and the right to refuse is very big. You should be able to choose your care. You should be able to choose what you refuse is done to your body. So if we're allowing that right, then we should allow people to make this decision for themselves. Now, the state of Nevada has tried passing a death with dignity law twice, and it has not met the deadline to be voted on both times, in 2015 and 2013. Or no, I'm sorry, 2015 and 2017, respectively. But the newest attempt was introduced in March of 2021, and it is currently in committee waiting to be approved for voting. But in a poll in 2017, there was a survey by Public Policy Polling, and it found that 72% of Nevadans support a death with dignity legislation. So voters are in support of this, and I really hope that we can get our legislators to vote on it and pass it. Death with dignity laws, they give terminally ill patients an option to end their suffering when they feel is right, when they feel like their quality of life is no longer worth living. And I conclude that all opposing arguments have been shown to not really be valid under Oregon's current laws. As long as protocols are being followed, terminally ill patients are allowed the right to choose for themselves. And I just think it should be passed in all 50 states. In James E. Liebman's book, Death with Dignity, He said that the Death with Dignity Act is consistent with 1, the right of individuals to exercise choice in a free country, 2, ethical medical practices, 3, the integrity of doctor-patient relationships, and 4, the role of a state law on regulating medical practices. And I agree with all of those points. I have worked in hospice for 10 years now, and I have watched my patients suffering from diseases that are incurable. I have seen their bodies waste away. I have witnessed their families losing their loved ones over the course of months to a heartbreaking illness. I know their pain and their fear and their uncertainty. I've had patients ask me to help them die, and I've heard people plead with God to please take their loved one and stop their suffering. I just don't see how we can be humane with our pets and stop their suffering, and we can't be humane with people and allow them to make a choice to end their own suffering when they feel the time is right. Death with dignity laws would allow that. They would prevent prosecution of physicians who choose to help patients with this, and they would also allow people to use their life insurance benefits if they choose to end their life early, instead of waiting months for a terminal illness to take them. And so I believe that they're good, and if you don't agree with it, just don't use it. Just don't do it. But if you agree with it, if you come to that point in your life where you need it, then you should be allowed to have it if that's what you need. So that's my stance on death with dignity. Thank you.